Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Grace Students Podcast. We're really excited to have you here. We have a good show for you. Hopefully, I don't know.
Hopefully.
Bryan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Scott. I'm doing well. I would like to think we wouldn't intentionally put out a bad show, but
I mean,
maybe
not
that's
not intentionally.
Maybe that's somebody's perspective. I don't know.
Yeah, well, hopefully today we can eliminate and correct that perspective for anyone who thinks this might be a bad podcast.
Yeah, I can't possibly think how it would be. But
No, I mean,
yeah, I'm doing well. It's been a little crazy lately, but I feel like I say that every time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reality that we're living in, but
I think so. I mean, I just think, I think if your life is dull and boring, you're not living it right, you know? So
too much extra time.
Too much extra time. I mean, you could definitely be too busy, but and sometimes I feel we're right on the
Maybe
cusp.
a little extra time would be nice.
Yeah, we're right on the cusp of being too busy.
As we prepare to trick or treat with our kids soon.
Right. And so, and it's freezing outside.
Freezing.
Like I think it literally is 30 some degrees.
Yeah.
But, so you had an actual really busy week last week because you got to give a message and preach the main sermon at the church building, I guess we'll say.
Good call.
Good, correct.
While the church was gathered.
And that's something that my boys are actually doing much better at than me. You know, saying, "Oh yeah, are we going to gather with the church?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to church."
Wait a
to
second.
gather with
Yeah.
the church. But great message. Really, really appreciated that. And so you spoke out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, and what we found is that a lot of people have trouble saying Thessalonians.
Thessalonians, yeah, I would try to say it and say it with the in front of it.
I think that's the problem.
Thessalonians isn't bad.
Yeah, it's the Thessalonians.
When you're trying to refer to the people, the
Yeah,
Thessalonians.
It's tough.
I didn't realize that until I got up there
Yeah.
in the first service. I was like, oh, that's harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I had never even thought about it until you told me. You're like, oh yeah, like it was trouble. And I'm like, and I'm like,
You're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a tongue twister. But if you could, like, break down for anyone who didn't get a chance to watch that message. First of all, you can go back to Grace Bible Church's Facebook page, and you can rewatch that on demand. And I would really encourage you to do so. But in the meantime, stick around here, and we'll kind of dig a little bit deeper into what that was. And so, in a couple of bullet points, what was the main purpose of preaching out of 1 Thessalonians?
The main idea was to try to get at what Paul was saying there to the Thessalonians, and here I am having to say it again.
I know.
But one thing I've found is we can easily misinterpret Scripture if we don't understand it in its context. And so the goal was to talk through some discipleship things, and that meant taking a look at one of the guys who really fleshed out what Jesus called us to do, and that was Paul. In this particular instance with the church in Thessalonica, he really brings out some interesting points. So I think the main idea of what Paul's trying to say there is that gospel-driven discipleship requires gospel-shaped priorities. And so Paul kind of lets us in on some of those priorities. And so I just try to talk through that. And anytime I have an opportunity to preach like that, I'm a big fan of expository preaching, which all that means is the main point of the passage is the main point of your sermon.
Right.
And so I just try to preach what's there. And so I think Paul lays out in a couple different ways what those priorities should be.
Yeah, and I think that what I gathered from it is if you don't look at that text within the context of how Paul intended it to be, like if you just pull it out, I mean, you can really screw it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can head down paths and be thinking, you know, hey, we're doing this. And then once you put it back in the context, you're like, man, we've been doing it all wrong. And so I think one of the big things that I gathered from it was just how bold Paul was. You know, he's like, we're not doing this to like please you people. We're not doing this for our gain. We're doing this strictly for God's glory and for God's gain. That was a big thing for me to wrap my head around, because it's very easy for us to go in and we think we're speaking the good news, and we think that we're bringing people closer to Jesus, and I've even used the terms like, I did really good relaying this message, and I feel like I'm really getting somewhere with so and so, talking about the gospel.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is that motive is wrong. It's not about whether I can do it. It's about presenting it and allowing the Spirit
Right.
to pull them. It's not what I can do for them. And so often it makes it very easy for us to just get sidetracked, and that's where that pride,
Right.
that we'll talk about, can come in, and so having the right motive is so essential. And so what would
Yeah.
what are some ways that you can check your motives to make sure that you are really your heart really is in it for the right reasons?
I think one of the most practical ways to do that is, what's the content of your conversation? Are you actually trying to point people to Jesus, or are you trying to really point them to yourself, or prove your argument?
Yeah.
Or I have the right view on this, and you should too. A lot of times we can come across like a jerk, if even in presenting the gospel, if we do it in a way that makes us look like we're good and not Jesus. So the benchmark for me is always, am I trying to get them to see how good Jesus is? And if not, then my motives are probably off.
Yeah.
And I think one of the huge things that Paul is trying to bring out in this Thessalonians passage is there's a speaking element, but there's a demonstrating element too, and those go hand in hand. Paul had the opportunity in a powerful way to do both with the Thessalonians, and he's just recounting that in this passage. Yeah. And I know for you and I have been trying to track together for a little while now, and we've been tracking with some other people,
Yeah.
and so we've been trying to live out this idea of demonstrating the good news by investing time in others, and in turn loving them well and finding out about them. And how have you seen some ways in which you've been able to do that, or wish maybe you could have taken advantage of some opportunities? What have you seen there?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing that we've taken away is, and I think that, I hate to say that it's like the quickest way to learn, because you're learning, but really the Spirit's changing your heart as you get into these discipleship conversations. But I think the biggest thing that I've really pulled away is how intentional that you have to be, and how you can't get to a certain point and say, okay, well, now I'm ready. Like, I don't have to do anymore. I can just start plugging into people.
Yeah.
Because what I've noticed in trying to lean in with other people and trek with them as well, your learning never stops.
Right.
Like, you don't reach this level of holiness or spirituality where you no longer need to be speaking truths to yourself or having others speaking truths into you. Like you never mature to that level. And for me, that was kind of the thought of, well, man, I'm not good enough to go disciple people because I'm not at that level yet. And it's not just for people who, think that they're above that or below. It's for everyone. I mean, and so we've kind of had conversations about, how do you even start discipling, or how do you start getting into conversations with people where you can see where they are in their faith journey? Because, like you said, you can come across as a jerk,
Yep.
If you come at them the wrong way. But in order to know where they are, you have to be in relation with them.
Right.
And so the biggest thing that I've learned, I'll say one of the biggest things that I've experienced is a better understanding of grace. Because when you're in these relationships and you're talking with people about things that are really nagging at your heart, and to get to root level sin in your life, and normally where you would say, man, I don't want to talk about that stuff because I feel ashamed or embarrassed or whatever, and you throw something out, and the response is, here's how you can work through that. Like, we're for you. We're not against you. We're not here to judge.
Yeah.
We're here to pull you along,
Yep.
and grow. That to me is such an amazing demonstration of grace. I mean, that's on the line of where you just feel the Spirit working and pulling you
Yeah.
closer to Christ. I mean, and not that we could ever reach the level of grace that God provides for us,
Right.
but I think that's a as best as we can probably get on this side of that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing with that, and it goes along with that, is you can't do that just in a 1 hour meeting a week.
No.
You can't do that just in a corporate worship setting. You have to get into life with people. And that's something that is uncomfortable for us because we want our space, we want our time, leave me alone. This is my personal time or space or whatever the case may be. And that idea of reorganizing perhaps our morning or our day around somebody else meeting a need, or even just showing up and being part of what's going on in their life, requires us to set aside ourselves and our own priorities. And I think gospel-driven discipleship does that. I think gospel-driven discipleship causes you to reshape your priorities around other people, not because they're more valuable than you, but because that's the expression of selflessness that Jesus calls us to.
Yep.
And it's designed to be, you model that for them so that they then see what that looks like to do with somebody else.
And like one of the big hurdles is thinking, oh, this is inconveniencing me. Like I have to restructure my day, or oh, well, now we can't get together on Friday night because something came up.
Yep.
It's not that. I mean, you may have that in the beginning where you're like trying to figure everyone out, but it comes to the point where, and we've experienced this, tracking with you guys, where something comes up, an opportunity comes up to go and to, connect and lean in with someone else when we were supposed to get together. And it's like, okay, well, that's the point of this, and so you become more fluid in what your rules are. And so you're able to say, you know what, that's important too. And so let's figure out how we can adjust, everything. Not
right.
Life is not like this concrete, schedule where we have to be so.
Yeah. I mean, you need
scheduled.
some of that, but you can't be driven by that.
Right.
And the gospel has to be what drives us. And you and I were just talking before we even started the podcast about, we found ourselves at a Young Life banquet earlier on in the week.
Right.
And that's something that it just hit me as we were there, that we were there because of the people that we were there with, not necessarily because of what the banquet was about, although we were interested in that and wanted to know more about that. We were there because of the people that we're trying to do life with, and that put a completely different spin on that than it would have been before. It's not just an event that we're going to, it becomes a connection point in the flow of life. And I think all of us just have to get better at recognizing those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, because those opportunities can come along and you think kind of nothing of them. It's like, oh, well,
or it's an inconvenience too.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing about like gospel discipleship. Like, that's the thing about sin. Like, it is like literally waiting for an opportunity to like strike, because you could say to yourself, oh, we're doing so good, look at these people we're leaning in with, and then all of a sudden you get pulled into that pride.
Yep.
Or you can say, man, like I don't want to lean in with these people, like it's not worth my time, like I don't want to share anything. And so then it's like pride on that. So like
Yep.
the idea of pride, which we'll be talking about in the next episode, I think, it just comes at you from all ways. But when you have people that you can trek in life with, you can guard against it so much easier.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, we were even at different tables.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of really cool to see that, and you run into other people, that and are kind of in relationship, and so you get to see how when the body of Christ comes together, just what is possible. And it's so critical to be able to take a moment while you're in those situations and just give him some praise, give him some glory, to be able to say, like, this is happening because of him. Like, he's pulling these people together. He's mixing these lives together. And that's such an awesome thing that we're even able to witness that.
Right. And even just be able to get a little glimpse of what that looks like, to be part of what Jesus is doing.
Yeah.
And so I think the way to wrap this up would be to kind of just throw the challenge out there. does Jesus come up in your conversations? Is he part of your everyday rather than just a particular day of the week or a particular gathering? Those are important, but Jesus is important for all of life. And so the challenge then becomes, if I'm not seeing where Jesus connects to all of life, then maybe it's because I'm not speaking with boldness, or I haven't taken opportunities to demonstrate how the good news has affected my life. And so, I mean, that's just something to ask yourself, because a lot of us struggle with bringing Jesus up, or how does he connect with my school or work or my family, or this relationship struggle that I'm having. How does the gospel speak to that? And I think it's understanding who God is and what he's done, and then speaking boldly about that and living in light of that, which is tough.
Yeah.
But it's what we're called to. So yeah.
Very cool.
I think that's all the time we have today.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.